prostitutes are scared to death, and they're being killed. Yet, he seems to have no trouble getting them. The answer is he's a regular client. They know him. They go with him. They have successful sex. He drives them back, drops them off, no problem. So they're not afraid to go with him. It's just some nights it goes terribly wrong.
We're trying to think, how can these prostitutes make these mistakes, knowing that there is a perpetrator on the street?
All right, so this story is very interesting. It's out of Rochester, New York, and it's about this man who's, I think he's alleged to have found guilty of killing 2 children, 11 prostitutes. His tales of cannibalism and mutilation have made him one of America's most notorious serial killers. That he killed 13 people by asphyxiation is certain. So he's been killing for a very long time, and his modus operandi was he would go to a certain strip in Rochester called the Red Light District, and he would date these prostitutes, pick them up, and then he would choke them to death. And the police had this entire Red Light District under surveillance. They had decoys, they had officers pretending to be pimps, they had officers pretending to be prostitutes, but this guy was still able to grab prostitutes under their nose and kill them. And like that officer said, why are these prostitutes so comfortable going with anybody at this point, knowing that there's a killer out there? And the answer to that is, like they said, the police are looking for somebody who stands out. But in reality, they should have been looking for somebody who fit in, somebody who was comfortable in that red light district environment, because they've been a regular customer, a regular John for years. And I always have a lot of sympathy for police officers, especially when they find dead children. You got to think that's so emotional. But check this out, man. I'm going to lay down some more context.
Is that snatching them right under police surveillance?
I think the prostitutes, and maybe to a degree, some of the investigators are looking for like a real weird guy or somebody really, really out of sync with what was going on, when in fact it was just the opposite. That you wanted to look for somebody who really was very much attuned to that scene and very comfortable in that environment.
But despite a massive police clampdown, the killing continued. Undercover police officers now poured into Lyle Avenue, posing as pimps and punters. But Shawcross wasn't fazed by their presence. He continued to hang out on the street.
I'm sitting on a stoop, and I got shiny shoes on, like a cop shoes, nice dress. And this guy sits down beside me, and he starts talking about the case, pointing out all the decoys. I'm laughing at him.
Why were you laughing at him?
Well, I just thought it was hilarious, He didn't know who I was, but he had to open his mouth. He thought he was talking to somebody on the team.
And he was actually talking to the killer?
Yeah.
We subsequently found out that he did hang out at a Dunkin' Donuts. And the police would be in there themselves talking about the homicide investigation and what they were doing, not giving up intimate details, but how they were focused on.
So he would hang out at this Dunkin' Donuts while police officers involved with this investigation are speaking freely, eating donuts. He even was mistaken as a police officer, as he stated in the story. He's sitting on a stoop, he's got on these shiny boots, and a police officer who's dressed as a decoy comes up to him to give him information about the case, pointing out who's a decoy, who's a fake prostitute, who's a fake pimp. And he's sitting in Dunkin' Donuts every night, ear hustling, listening to the police talk about the case and what they're doing to eliminate suspects. So he just listens and does the opposite, and that's how he was able to also get the most successful of his victims, which was known as the toughest, roughest prostitute in Rochester, New York history. This woman was a madam, and everybody was surprised when she became one of his victims, because she was, known throughout Rochester, New York as a prostitute that didn't play games, that was very, very good with her judgment. And everybody was surprised when this madam was killed next.
On looking at every vehicle that went down the road and maybe writing down plate numbers and running data. He was listening to that information.
One of the street's most notorious hookers disappeared from Lyle Avenue.
She was the madam of the streets. She was the meanest prostitute in the city of Rochester. and they all respected June Cicero.
Shawcross had picked her up in the Chevrolet Celebrity that he'd borrowed from his mistress, Clara.
How did June Cicero die? How did you kill her?
Strangled her.
Astonishing personal history, a trail of murder stretching back almost 20 years. Shawcross had grown up around Watertown, 100 miles east of Rochester. In May 1972, an 8-year-old girl, Karen Hill, was reported missing. Fearing she drowned, the police began searching the banks of the Black River.
And we went over the bank, and I went on one side, Officer Passer went on the other side, and he says, "Here she is." I walked over under the bridge. We saw this little body buried with the stones on her, and her little feet sticking up. We knew she was dead because.
And it's just like, wow, man, police always make the mistake of looking for the weird guy, you know. Even though this guy did have a history of murder stretching back 20 years, once they finally found out who he was, they investigated his background, and he had been charged with these murders and the suspect in these murders. So but he was so excellent in fitting in to that red light district. You understand what I'm saying? It's just for the police officer on the street to actually walk up to him while he's on the stoop and tell him, "Hey, that's a decoy." I mean, it just goes to show you, man, that I just hope that police technique has improved over the years, and I hope that the police have learned, you know, don't go into a public establishment like Dunkin' Donuts and talk openly about the case. The killer was literally in there listening. So, man, this guy's yeah, man. Like I said, I always have sympathy for cops who discover the bodies of dead children, man. And this guy right here is a true monster. And, you know, I'm not here to tell you why he did it. I'm just here to tell you that the police, thank God they finally got on the ball, because they were making fatal mistakes without even realizing it. They were actually aiding and abetting this killer for quite some time during the investigation. But eventually they got him. Peace.